Today, please.
Sure. My name is Brian Shircliff. Been a member of Bellarmine Parish since I went to Xavier. Just had my 20-year reunion at Xavier, so been around for a little while. Helped out with RCIA and taught religion at St. Xavier High School for 17 years before I left about 4 years ago to found Vitality Cincinnati, where we offer yoga, human touch, meditation, tai chi, journaling, conversation, community gardening, just ways to invite people to come together and find their own path. So we're just up the street from here on Montgomery Road. So if you know where the Domino's Pizza is in Norwood, that's our parking lot. Everybody seems to know where the Domino's Pizza is. So I'm very happy to be able to be with you, and wondering if we might be able to introduce ourselves to one another. Maybe you already all know each other, but I don't know. I know many of you from being at Mass together, but it'd be nice just to hear a little bit, hear your voice in the circle, and maybe you could offer your name and what you're looking forward to most about the Thanksgiving weekend. There's got to be something there. There's got to be something. So I get a chance to go to Seattle to see my sister. My family's all meeting in Seattle, so very much looking forward to that. It's a great city, but also just to see my sister, who I don't get to see very often. She's so far away. So that's what I'm looking forward to the most. And she's cooking, so makes it easy for me. We can go around and circle for you. Sure.
I'm Elizabeth, and I'm probably looking forward to the spring influence.
What's your favorite food?
I like the stuffing.
My name's Bridget, and I'm probably looking forward to food and also our neighborhood football game on Thursday morning.
Cool.
My name is also Brian. I'm looking forward to having a break from school.
You're the one.
You go to Sam.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Good place.
My name is Brad. I'm looking for the food.
Good. Do you have a favorite food?
Probably.
All of it?
No.
I
Probably
like it all.
I think.
Good.
I'm Derek. I come from a big family, so we celebrate Thanksgiving in October, Canadian Thanksgiving.
Oh.
So for our own Thanksgiving, we're just going out to dinner. So I'm looking forward to
Nice.
going out and
Yeah.
being with our family.
Good for you.
My name's Andy. Probably most look forward to my wife's family's from southwestern Indiana, and they make a giant kettle of turtle soup on Friday after Thanksgiving.
wow.
That's a big deal.
My name's Jessica, and I'm looking forward to being with family.
My name's Abby, and I'm just looking forward to going out of town.
My name's Grace, and I'm looking forward to the food.
Do you have a favorite food?
The turkey.
Yeah.
My name is Melissa, and I'm most looking forward to not cooking and going out to dinner.
My name is Oscar, and I'm looking forward to not having to go to school.
Yeah. Time for a break, isn't it?
My name is Alicia, and I'm looking forward to having a long weekend with my family and a few obligations.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Martha, and I'm actually looking forward to the cooking
Good.
and just not having a whole lot else to do.
Good life.
over the weekend.
My name's Michael, and I'm looking forward to the state semifinal football game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good game the other night, huh?
Yeah.
Wild fourth quarter.
My name's Lucy, and I'm looking forward to being with family.
My name's Will, and I'm looking forward to the turkey.
Yeah.
My name is Sue, and I'm looking forward to spending time with family, catching up a little bit, and good food.
And I'm Russ, and I'm looking forward to spending time with my family and with my parents, who, thank God, are still with us.
Be a nice weekend. Nice to be able to enjoy it before we even get there, in a sense, too. So when I was a Xavier student, and matter of fact, it's kind of strange to be back in this building because it didn't look like this. Those of us that used to be in this space was pretty basic space, but now it's beautiful. So I was an English major, and really enjoyed stories. I always have enjoyed stories, right? Whether they're movies or something to read or some story somebody tells us or a story we tell ourselves. And very quickly, though, I found that the best stories were actually in this book. And they make you take these theology classes here, and I suddenly fell in love and switched my major to theology to be able to pursue what was in this book because I found it fascinating. I was fortunate to have a few good teachers that were able to draw me in, and very courageous to be able to break open this book. Some weird stuff in here, very strange stuff, and today perhaps we'll get a chance to discover some of that. So I'd like to start off with a story, and the story's about this young man who was at the football game just the other night, and pretty exciting at finish, so people were celebrating in the parking lot, and he's got his phone, and he's waiting for his ride, and his parents are supposed to come get him. He's already texted them, they're supposed to be on their way, and the party starts dispersing in the parking lot, people start heading home, and his parents still haven't shown up. And some of his friends walk by and say, well, do you need a ride? You know, from just the neighborhood over, we can give you a ride. Oh, no, my parents are coming. I know they're coming. And I'm okay. So they all leave, and the parking lot's getting a little more empty. And a couple seniors walk by and say, you know, we can give you a ride. We're from the same homeroom, and it's cool. You can call your parents, let them know. No, they're coming. I know if I change plans, I'll get angry. They're coming. So, okay, man, all right. Want us to wait with you? Oh, no, I'm all right. So before you know it, he's alone there in that parking lot. Not a soul around. And he starts, he's called, he's texted a couple times, and his parents still responded. And he thought, well, maybe they got hung up at grandparents' house, or I don't know, but they still haven't shown up. And so he starts thinking, well, what am I going to do? There's nobody here. So he starts, I guess I can walk home. Or maybe I can just start walking. Maybe they'll see me then, and be able to connect that way. So he texts that's what he's going to do, and he starts walking, and he knows the way. It's an easy way, but it's a distance. And as soon as he leaves that parking lot, just outside the bright, shiny lights of the field, this little band of jerks walk by, and they see him all alone, wearing his nice school gear, and they start pushing him around and calling him all kinds of things, like, look at that little pretty boy in his little school jacket, look at him, and they're pushing him around. I want the jacket. They start fighting for his stuff. And, I bet he's got a wallet. Oh, he's got a wallet with money in it. They take that, and before you know it, they beat this guy to a pulp on the ground, taking everything that he has, all the way down to his underwear. That's this big joke that they were doing. And there he is on the ground, just beaten to a pulp, bleeding, unconscious, and these guys just run away with his stuff. And there he is, right there on the ground. Not a soul drives by for a while. And there he is, right there. And all of a sudden, one car drives by. It's a guy in the car, and headlights hit this body on the side of the road. Whoa, I think that's a human being right there, I think. And pulls up along the side, and nobody else is around, and he's on his way to this big post-election gathering, trying to figure out. He's got this bumper sticker on the back of his car. It's a donkey, Democrat pride, and he's trying to figure out what to do. And he's like, I cannot be late for this meeting. And we got major work to do, and I'll call when I get there. Because I can't, my phone's dead, and I gotta go. And this guy drives off. Poor guy's still there on the ground, not moving, breathing, not moving. And it's cold. So next, another car drives by, and headlights flash on this body there on the side of the road. Car stops, and a woman in the car, and she pulls up alongside and is thinking, is this really happening? I mean, that's a body there on the ground. And I don't know what to do. Looks around, not real familiar with the neighborhood, a little bit scared. And she says, I want to call 911, but I know that becomes part of the public record, and I've got to get to this meeting because I agreed to help my party help out. And she's got an elephant on the back of her car, bumper sticker, and she's going to this Republican Party celebration and planning, and she drives off and says, well, I'll call 911 from the phone at the place, so I don't want my number attached with this, and she drives off. That guy's still there on the ground. Rough, huh? Pretty rough. So then this other guy just starts walking by, another young man, and seems not really familiar with the area, but he's walked it before. He walks by and he sees this person on the ground and freaks out. You know, I was like, is that a body? Is that somebody on the ground? And mutters something under his breath in some language that we might not know, we might not recognize. And he starts thinking, oh, I think that is somebody. And he walks up a little, pulls open his phone, it's a flip phone, and shines what little light there is. Yeah, I think that is somebody. Walks up a little closer and then starts thinking, I shouldn't. I was told not to get involved in anything that's going to cause me trouble so I can get my citizenship application in, and I just can't. And he starts to walk away and then turns around. I gotta do something, and walks up to this guy and shakes him, and there's no response, and gets on his phone, dials 911, and I need somebody's collapsed here on the ground, and takes off his own jacket, puts it on this guy on the ground, caresses his cheek and says, it's gonna be okay, stay with me, it's gonna be okay. And he gets blood all over himself as he's, right near this guy that's been bleeding and unconscious on the ground. And the ambulance pulls up, and they push him out of the way, start taking care of the guy, and the police car pulls up and cordons off the area. And there's this young man who doesn't have any real ID, maybe some paperwork, but not the kind of ID we'd be used to, no driver's license, no nothing like that. And the police walk up to this guy that's covered in blood and say, what's the deal, man? You're the cause of this. And they start bundling up the guy and putting him in the ambulance, and he calls out, where are you taking him? Where are you taking him? Where are you taking him? And they say, University Hospital. And he's trying to figure out even where that is in his mind. Thinks, oh my gosh, my cousins, when I first got to this country just a couple weeks ago, they gave me these brand new clothes, and I gotta give these to him. I gotta give these to this guy. Never met him before in his life. Crazy story, huh? What do you think about that story? Glad it's not you, right? Glad it's not you on the ground, right? Yeah. What do you think about this story? I've already talked too much. What do you think about this story? Anything surprise you in the story? Anything that you're curious about? No, it's a perfectly good answer. No, there's nothing. But at least you say something.
Well, I was at Joseph Beth the other day.
Yeah.
And I was looking for something, and I walked by the little area by the coffee stand, and there was a woman sitting there, and after I walked past her, I realized she was crying. And I was like, and then I saw she was reading the New York Times. I went back to the back and looked for what I was looking for, and didn't find it, and I was like, I should go talk to that woman and see why she's crying. See if she's okay, if she has somebody to talk to, or, oh no, she's gonna be embarrassed, so I'm not gonna stop. So I went and did another errand in the same plaza, and I thought, no, I gotta go back there, it's gonna bother me all day if I don't. And this is just a clothed person in a public place, crying. But I spent that much time wondering, should I stop or not? And I finally told myself, I gotta go back. Well, I saw her getting in the passenger side of a car when I had convinced myself to go back. So I thought, well, at least she's not alone. And she's getting in the car, being taken care of. But, I feel for people. Sometimes we get these opportunities, maybe, but it's hard to know whether to take them. That's even a safe place, not dark, public. But to be in a situation like you're describing.
Scary.
It's scary.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not easy for us to move out of our routines, for sure. And yet for something happened inside this young man that was walking by that he did stop. That sounded like a great risk, perhaps, right? It's supposed to get into trouble when you got to get a citizenship application there, I suppose. Anyone familiar with this story? Heard this story before, or a version of this story before?
The Good Samaritan.
Yeah, this is, of course, the Good Samaritan, right? The story of the Good Samaritan. And Jesus tells this very strange story with this similar kind of punchline that gets the crowd pretty quiet. You know, like, and who are the two people that, so some guy is walking from Jerusalem to Jericho, and it's a major trade route, and it's also a major place where you would more than likely be mugged. You know how they protected their valuables, like pearls or gold, on a journey like this often? You'd eat them. You'd eat them. Hope they come out again. You'd eat them, yeah. So this guy's walking along, and he gets jumped, gets mugged, and they beat him up, and he's on the ground unconscious, in Jesus' version. And who are the two people that walk by? Who's the first person? You remember this? You don't have to. Yeah, it's a priest, right? The priest walks by, and he decides not to touch this person that's suffering on the ground. Do we know anything? And today that would be outrageous, right? But in the ancient world, that would have been, the crowd probably would have expected that, because priests were told to stay away from blood, because it would make them unclean or unfit for service as a priest for so much time. And it's about 30 days or something like that. So, and if he's on his way to Jerusalem, where the temple is, where his duty is as priest, well, he cannot absolutely touch somebody that's bloody. And it's not like he has a cell phone in the ancient world to dial 911 to get some help here. So he probably figured, this is trouble, right? I mean, all of us would probably think, no matter how good we are, somebody's on the ground, this is not a good situation for me to just immediately, oh, this will be great, I'll help this person, right? This is like, somebody beat him up and they're probably watching, right? So the priest walks by. Who's the second person that walks by? Another person comes by, and it happens to be a Levite, which is like first-class priests, like their lineage goes way back, you know. And he is in the same situation, can't be in your blood, probably scared, just like any of us would be, and he walks by as well. And then the Samaritan walks by. And most people hearing the story in the ancient world, especially if you're from the south, Samaria is kind of like Canada to the north, you might say. Our friends of North America, who we tend to see eye to eye with, right? And sometimes we have disagreements with, pretty minor in our situation. Samaria was once part of Judea, part of Israel, until there was this, some hard feelings a couple hundred years before Jesus' time, and they never got along. They were always like, oh, that's Samaritans. You know, they're of the same religion, but they're not like us. The crowd would probably, when they hear the Samaritan coming by, the crowd in the ancient world would probably be like, huh, he's probably going to kick the guy. I bet the Samaritan will kick the guy on the ground. That's what he'll probably do. And instead, Jesus has the guy get down on his knees, care for the guy. He gets out oil and wine. Why would he be carrying that? That's what you usually carry, right? Is that what you brought today? You have one in one pocket, one in the other? Yeah. Why would they carry oil? What do you think you use oil for in the ancient world? We do today, too.
Light.
I'm sorry?
Light.
For light, yeah, you could. You could burn it for light, right? Got a wick. It's true. What else would you use it for?
Is it currency?
It could be currency. Yeah, I mean, you could sell it. Yeah. I'm sorry?
Dry skin?
Dry skin, yeah. You can use it for lots of things, right? And also, when you go to the nice restaurant and you have bread, what do you want to dip it in? Oil, right? It's the same thing in their world as our world. So, be part of his meal. Probably get using part of his meal. And the wine, anyone know what the common meal of the ancient world is, no matter how poor you are?
Bread and wine.
Bread and wine. That's the reason the Eucharist is bread and wine. It was the common meal. And the meal at the Last Supper, of course. So, he's taking his food and using his sustenance to help this guy on the ground. Pours the wine, and what would wine do to a wound? Wouldn't be our first choice today, probably, but what would it do? We would disinfect it at least a little bit, maybe, we hope, right? And the oil, probably to soften it a little bit. Care for it, kind of like our, what we use today, polysporin or something like that, neosporin or something like that. So he uses his own food, puts the guy that's down on the ground on his own donkey, takes him to an inn, pops down a couple weeks worth of wages, a couple $100 on the table, and says, care for this guy and make sure he's okay, and when I come back, if I owe you anything else, I'll pay it. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So how do you think people, just as we were probably a little stunned in the story, how do you think people in the ancient world would be responding to Jesus' story? Applause. No, their enemy was the guy that was the hero of the story. The person that they didn't like was the one that was the perfect person of the story that stepped up and had some courage to save the day. Makes you feel good, right? I mean, just think about who is somebody who you just can't, no names. Somebody you can't stand, whether you know the person intimately or not. Can you imagine that person being the one that would stop and care for the person that's unconscious, naked, and bloody on the ground? Makes me kind of sick. I don't know about you, to think that my enemies might be good people. You know, how dare we think this? So, you might start to wonder what Jesus is up to in stories like this, because this is what he would do. He would just sit around and tell stories. And we're lucky enough that some of them got recorded and part of our tradition, and we still have them. What do you think he's up to? I mean, why would he tell a story like that? Just to mess with people? Maybe. Maybe. But why tell a story like that? What do you think?
To teach.
Yeah, what would it teach?
To me, it causes me to be more introspective and think about, okay, this story is strange, and of course I would be the one helping, of course.
That's right. All of us.
But maybe it's the little things in my life. Maybe I am that person that walks by in some instances. And maybe I should stop and really think about everything I say and do. Not just these major 911 incidents, but little, someone bumping with a cart at Kroger, anything, crying in a bookstore or something.
Sure. Yeah. Calls us into question a little bit about wondering about our lives and some things. So maybe that's what Jesus is up to. Any other possibilities?
Maybe to get you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
To remind you that you got to get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, what happens when we get out of our comfort zone?
Usually good things.
Usually.
But getting there is not always
Right.
the easy part.
Yeah, we have our routines or our ways of being, or the people that we would usually speak with, or people we would even usually make eye contact with, right? And here's Jesus inviting us to kind of wonder about somebody that we don't even think is human, a Samaritan, or whoever it might be, our enemy, or somebody that we just don't think is worth their salt, worth anything. Very strange, this imagination of Jesus. And maybe he's always playing with that comfort zone a little bit. Yeah. So he gets another little parable, short one, and he says, anyone just go to 11 o'clock Mass? So we heard Father Dan talking about the reign of God, or the kingdom of God, or how might we say that today? The very reality of God, the stuff of God, the stuff of life, is like a woman playing with 3 measures of flour and adding yeast. You can see her all rolling on the ground on that. What do you think about that? The very reality of God is like a woman playing with 3 measures of flour and adding yeast. Hysterical, isn't it? You're going to run home and tell your friends? Yeah, well, Jesus wasn't talking to us, right? He lived 2,000 years ago or so. So we might have to step into his world a little bit, because most of the things in the Bible are kind of like listening to our grandparents' jokes, or people of our grandparents' generation. So when you hear one of your grandparents' jokes, how do you usually respond? Yeah, it's like, that was funny. No, exactly. We have to know something of their world. So most of the, what's the funniest show that you watched today? You can say it out loud. Other people probably watch it too. Modern Family? Yeah. Good. How about another one?
Don't make me call on you guys.
Yeah.
The Office.
The Office. Good. I like The Office.
Oh, I Met Your Mother.
Okay. Good.
Family Guy.
Family Guy. Good.
Friends.
Friends. Woody but a goodie. So in 100 years from now, the things that we laugh at in these shows, which are pretty funny, right? Yeah, I think they're really good. 100 years from now, do you think people are going to be laughing at those things? Even 50 years from now. Say you sit down with your grandkids someday and you say, I want to show you this show that I just loved it when I was your age. And you sit down and you're laughing hysterically and they're going to be looking at you like, you lost your mind. This is not even funny. Because comedy, or anything that really catches our attention, needs to be current, right? So if we want to understand something that is 2,000 years old, we need to kind of jump into their shoes, people's shoes from that world. And that's the challenge of Scripture, right? This is 2,000 or 3,000 years old, depending on which part of the Bible we're talking about. So much even more distant than our grandparents. So if we think about this, Jesus comes along and says, you want to know what the very reality of God is like? It's like this woman playing with 3 measures of flour and adding yeast. So what do you know about making bread? I heard about making rolls over here a little while ago for the Thanksgiving dinner. How do you make bread? Say we're going to make a loaf of bread. What goes in there?
Yeast to help it rise.
Yeast to help it rise, yeah, very much so. What else goes in? So if we got our little bowl right here, we're going to make bread.
Water.
Water, yeah. So if we're going to make a loaf, about a cup or so, right? Cup and a half maybe. What else goes in there? Right now we got yeast and water. It's not going to taste too good, folks. What else goes in there?
Flour.
Flour, yeah, some kind of flour. And how much flour for a loaf? About?
3 cups.
Yeah, maybe 3 cups or so. Yeah. And then something's got to hold it all together. Right now it's just going to be a soupy mess, right? Probably some oil or an egg or what else? Flaxseed, grind that down, that works. Or what's the other new thing that they're using? The drippings from garbanzo beans is now egg replacement. It just kind of grosses me out, but apparently works. So yeah, something to hold it together. So here we are making our bread. Jesus comes along and says, oh, you want to know what the very reality of God is like? It's like this woman playing with 3 measures of flour and adding yeast. Hysterical, isn't it? What's in the ancient world, how much is 3 measures of flour? No ancient scholars here of ancient measurements? Oh my goodness, what kind of group is this?
I'm sorry, Brian. I would have prepared them better. I'm sorry.
I know, I'm sorry. Exactly. We don't know these things, but if we would talk to scholars, we'd discover that it's about 50 pounds of flour. Where do you get the 50-pound bag of flour? Where do you shop for something like that?
Jumbo Jim's.
Yeah, Jumbo Jim's maybe, or Costco, or Sam's Club. I mean, 50 pounds of flour is like this, you know. So this woman, want to know what the reality of God is like? It's like this woman playing with 50 pounds of dough and adding yeast. It's getting a little funnier, right? So when you add the yeast to that 50-pound bowl of dough, I mean, what do you got to do to make the yeast work? You can't just like throw it in there and mix it up like that. What do you got to do?
Dissolve it in warm water.
Yeah, you have to dissolve it in warm water. True. And eventually you've got to knead it. You got to literally force feeding the yeast to eat some of the sugars in the flour, or if you put sugar in the mix, it'll eat that. And then it digests that and burps it or does something, and then that becomes the gas that makes the flour, that dough rise, right? But you ever done this before? It's one of the best workouts ever, I think, is kneading. Oh my goodness, I used to make pizza crusts. After 10 minutes, it's like, oh
Have you
my
seen
goodness.
the Michael Pollan documentary?
I've not seen it.
There's a really good, what's it called? Cooked. It's on Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the episodes is about bread.
Oh, cool. Now we'll go watch
Explains
it.
what you're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah. So if we're kneading like our little lump of dough like this to make bread, it's just going to be like this, and it starts off being real slimy and nasty, you know, and then eventually starts to kind of form, right? As the everything in there starts getting meshed together, and then it starts to eventually set it aside. It'll rise a little bit. But imagine this woman kneading the 50-pound thing of dough. Right?
How big would that get?
Well, it would start off like something like this, right? And she's got to knead it, so. You know, and you can imagine the sticky mess all over her, and she's trying to knead this thing. You know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's getting a little funnier, right? When Jesus comes along and says that the very reality of God is like this woman playing with 45 pounds of dough and adding yeast. Laughing now? Yeah, it's getting a little funnier. Getting a little funnier. And what do we know about yeast? I mean, how do we get yeast today? You buy it at the store, right? Yeah, we go to Kroger and buy our little Fleshman packets or Kroger brand packets, or maybe the jar, and then dish it out, and you pour it in, right? It just looks like little yellow flakes kind of thing, and pour it into the water, and it smells funky, and then you mix it in, and it's all nice and clean and nice, and does its thing. But in the ancient world, there was no Kroger. I know this is news. There was no Kroger where you can go. Not even a UDF. Terrible. So they had to make their own. And the way you make it is you take an old piece of bread and you get it just a little bit wet, and you put it in the dark, cold, dank kind of part of your, not cold, but not like super hot part of your house. And then you just let it sit there. And what do you think is going to happen to it as you wet down that bread? It's going to mold over. It's going to be nasty. I had a college roommate that, I think I told the story last time, so it's worth telling again. A college roommate who, we were living in an apartment in Mount Lookout, and I walked into the house one day, or the apartment one day, and I go, something here smells not right. And I started walking, and went to the bathroom, and no, it's not in here. And I went into my room, maybe it's my clothes, but it's not in here. Took a whiff in his room, no, it's not here either. And then I started being led to the kitchen. Yeah, it's in here, around here. I opened up my cabinet. Of course, there was no food there because he ate all my food. And then I opened up his cabinet, and there was this bag of Wonder Bread that had been there for probably months, and the bag was moving a life of its own as the Wonder Bread had become just slime. And in the ancient world, that's what you do to get your yeast. You reach into that and smack it into your dough and knead it in, and that's your yeast, and that's what makes the bread rise. Delicious, huh? If we only knew what we need, what we need today. But it's good, it's good. So the story gets a little stranger too, in that if we know something about the Jewish tradition from which Jesus comes, what's the relationship with yeast, especially around a special holiday that they have? Yeah, Passover. Yeah, on Passover they have unleavened bread, because as we know in the story of Exodus, they didn't have time to sit around and let the bread rise because they were hightailing it out of Egypt and out of slavery. And so if you were near the Passover, Jesus is telling this story near the Passover, you know, you'd be all banana shape about getting all the yeast out of your house for fear that even just all you need is a little bit under your fingernail, a little bit in your house that would get into your unleavened bread, and you'd be the laughing stock of the neighborhood. You know, like, they made their unleavened bread and it rose. You know, it'd be kind of like my family making the turkey. You know, they cook the turkey and they didn't take the organs out. They're going to be cooking it for 3 years and it's still not going to get done. You know, kind of thing. So you just laugh. So people hearing the story, when they hear that this woman is playing with 45 or 50 pounds of dough and then adding yeast, You'd be kind of like, huh, you know. And on top of it, who were the ancient bread bakers? You can run up to the library real quick and look this up. It's all in there, actually. I know where the little skinny book, Aramaeus, 1920 something, all this research. Ancient bread bakers were men. It was an activity that people that studied the ancient world think it was some activity that men did with their kids. So when Jesus comes along and says, you want to know what the very reality of God is like? It's like this woman playing with 50 pounds of dough. Wait a minute, what? And then adding yeast. Nothing in the story is as we would expect. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And Jesus says, that's what God is like. That's your vision of God? And in mine, it's pretty crazy. It'd be kind of like the very reality of God is like this wide receiver who going up for the catch. All he's got to do is catch and fall into the end zone. He catches, turns the other direction, punts the ball the opposite direction. That's the reality of God. Or like a student who is taking the final exam. All a student has to do is get like 3 questions right to pass the class, and studied all night long and is just so done with it and takes the Scantron form and starts just drawing all over the form, connecting dots. That's the very reality of God. I wouldn't try that. I wouldn't try that. Kingdom of God is like somebody that bought a lottery ticket, all excited there at the kitchen table, has a candle lit there for dinner, and matching up the numbers on the TV, and sees that that ticket's worth millions and millions of dollars, and is so excited, turns the other direction. Oh my gosh, it catches on fire. Gone. Gone. The reality of God is like a young kid with diarrhea in the swimming pool. That's the reality of God. It's crazy. So again, we might ask, what is Jesus up to? Very strange imagination this guy has. And we think he's important or something, right, in our tradition. So what do you think he's up to? Why would he tell weird stories like this about that kid on the ground that's all beat up, or about this woman with 50 pounds of dough and adding yeast, or any of these other little modern versions? What do you think he's up to? I don't know, that's why I'm asking you. What do you think?
Must have known teenagers are tough and he's trying to get their attention.
Maybe. Maybe. There aren't any wrong answers here, you know. There aren't any wrong answers. Would you want to hang out with a guy like this? That would tell just strange stories? Yeah, why? I would too. Why would you want to?
Because he's interesting?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, isn't it?
Look at Kanye West.
Yeah. How so?
I mean,
There are a lot of reasons to look at Kanye West, I suppose.
he's pretty popular and pretty famous, and he says some really unusual stuff.
Yeah, we wait to hear what the next unusual thing is.
Yes,
Right?
it's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah. And sometimes there's some truth to what he says, right? It's like, I don't
Sometimes
think
there's
about
a
life
bit of
that way.
genius.
Yeah.
You
don't go that far?
I won't cheer.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what if, well, how many people would be at least interested to hang out with him at least for a night, this guy telling weird stories? Just to kind of wonder, like, where are you coming from? Yeah. And we might not be real comfortable with it, out of our comfort zone in a sense. But the question I want to ask is, what if he's right? What if that is the way God is? That it's not and maybe at least not just the image of God that we have, whatever that might be, the pearly gates or the grandparently figure up on a throne or whatever. What if God is like this woman playing with 50 pounds of dough and adding yeast? Or this kid in the pool with diarrhea? Or, I mean, could God be found even there? Is it possible that God might be like that too? What do you think? Do you think God might be just as much like the student who gets 100 on the test as the student who studied forever and got 70 on the test, and just as much like, God could be just as much like the student who didn't study at all and got a 30-something? Is it possible that God could be present in all of these possibilities? Maybe so, right? Maybe so. Yeah. So,
Oh, but is he like trying to like break down the barrier of him being like above all of us? Like he can like hear someone with just a touch, but then again he has like he makes mistakes like all of us.
yeah, maybe so.
And he can show himself in different ways and not just like as a perfect human being or
Yeah,
something like that.
right. So his story does kind of level the playing field in some ways, right? When we tell stories, we realize our commonness, our humanity that we all share, even though we might have been special in some other ways, right? Yeah. Yeah. You know what's really strange about this guy who, as you said, cures people with a touch, sometimes even a look, is that he sends people off to go do the same thing. His buddies were a bunch of dolts. They're not very smart people. If you read the stories, you know. If you read the stories of the disciples, you're like, oh my goodness, he didn't have very good friends. And he sends, you go off and heal people. Stop watching me. You go do it. I mean, talk about getting off your pedestal, right? It's no longer just about me doing things. You trust that God's going to work through you. Oh, I don't think so. I don't know about these hands, they aren't going to do anything. You go do it. You trust. As a matter of fact, take nothing with you. Trust that you're going to be, people are going to feed you. Trust that you're going to get exactly what you need. This guy is pretty wild. It would always be an adventure hanging out with Jesus. You wouldn't know what to expect. And maybe that would be challenging for us to be outside our comfort zone like that often. We might discover that we're completely free. No longer, the old expectations are all gone. And what if our enemies could be good people? And what if those qualities in my own self that I don't like to talk about in public, but all the parts of my own self that I don't like very much, what if God could be present there? Jesus is onto something. So, I'll have to think about it. So what do you say about all this? What do you think about this Jesus guy? Talking too much again. Time for me to be quiet for a little while.
Think of at least one or two words, and we'll just go around the circle. I'm going to pick on Elizabeth first, so, you might as well just relax. And what do you think of Jesus?
I think that he's trying to teach people to be more open-minded about God.
Okay, you can just keep going around.
And present challenges.
Take a risk.
Face challenges.
Broadcast the word of God.
Revolutionary.
Welcoming.
Oh yeah, staying humble, compassionate.
Seeing things from other people's points of view.
Change.
Be kind.
Teacher.
Wants to step out.
My favorite person.
He's a nice fellow.
Is it what?
He's a nice fellow.
Nice fellow. She said a nutso. Maybe that too. Yeah, that too.
It makes me want to think, and not only just challenge, but think in a whole different way.
Yeah.
Very creative.
Creative. up with people and just said, okay, now be nice, be good, would that inspire you? Would that make you? I'm going to do it! I'm going to do it! Probably not, right? So what's his way of teaching is, what we call kind of like around the back door, or parabolic. Just when you think you got it, you're like, wait a minute, I don't even know where I am anymore. To make us, invite us to find it in our own selves, in our own terms. I mean, if you just stood up and said, God can be found everywhere, isn't that nice? We can make Hallmark cards, with nice little sayings like that. But instead, he shatters, our own assumptions by telling just these weird stories that you'd probably never forget, even if you tried. Kind of like stand-up comedians, very much so. I mean, have you ever listened to stand-up comedy? And sometimes you're listening to them and you're like, whether you just can't believe they just said the things they do, and that can't be true. Whatever they just said about life, or about politics, or about relationships, that can't be true, but we laugh hysterically, and then the next day we sit there, like when we have a free moment, as if we have that, maybe it's Thanksgiving weekend, we're sitting there staring at the wall and think, gosh, what the comedian said, I didn't agree yesterday, but I think that might be true. Jesus has that same kind of strategy. Pretty surprising. So when we hear the readings at church, I often laugh. About 90% of this book is meant to be funny or startling. That's a lot. Most of the stories are designed to kind of like catch you, like, wait a minute. But it's kind of like our grandparents' jokes, right? We hear them and like, what are you talking about? It doesn't have anything to do with anything, but we know something about the world from which Jesus came, or his ancestors came 1,000 years before him. Is when this whole book gets started. Around a campfire, so just telling stories. Stories about life, about people. If you know something about their world, then suddenly these stories get a little bit interesting. So when I'm at Bellman and I start to hear the readings, I'm usually giggling. And you can catch those in the crowd that know something in the ancient world, they're usually giggling too. Like, that happens to me a lot. Something is read, sorry. Because if you know something of that time, this book's fascinating. If you don't know something of that time, the book just seems kind of like, heard that before. So maybe an invitation for us to know our grandparents and our deeper grandparents, kind of wonder about their minds and why the stories are told the way they are. Because if you know anything about the Bible, there's not much in there that tells you, like, this is the way it is. Most of it is designed almost like questions or weird stories to play with our imagination. And you're kind of like, what? And it kind of keeps getting at us. The great gift of going to Mass is that we get a chance to hear these stories, one, spoken publicly, right? We don't get a chance to, and oftentimes it's even poetry spoken publicly. We don't do that in our culture very often, right? It's pretty surprising. But then we get a chance to kind of play with that and wonder about it each time that we hear it. Should we take a little break, do you think?
Yeah.
Just a little pause. Come back and do a little activity. Take care. Little stretch break, restroom break. Check out the amazing building. So Jeremiah is living during a time, very dangerous time in Israel. 6th century BC, and the country is just about to be invaded by the great power to the north, Babylon. They'd been invaded by the great power a couple generations before that, Assyria. So dangerous times, and people were just kind of clueless about what was happening. And Jeremiah figured that if he just stood up and just said, well, we need to figure this out, and everything's going to be okay. Of course, nobody's going to listen to that, right? So his way of like jump-starting people's imaginations that they had to act soon and to trust that they were going to get through this, through their faith, through their connection with God, he came up with very clever ways. So you can imagine if the president were holding a meeting, like with special tables right here, with all the leaders of our country, and they're figuring out what to do, and Jeremiah gets invited to the meeting, or doesn't get invited to the meeting. How would you imagine, what do you think he could do to kind of wake people up to realize that we need to unify enough of the divisions in our country. We have a couple right now, have you paid attention?
Yeah.
So enough of the division. We need to take care of the poor. We need to be all on the same page, and we need to trust that God will get us through this. What would he do to maybe wake people up? Because if you just say those things, you're just like, no, I've heard this all before. Matter of fact, Jeremiah even said that we should submit to the people that we're going to invade. We should just take it. We've done horrible things the last few generations. We should just take it. So Jeremiah shows up at the meeting wearing an ox yoke. It's what you put on top of an ox and attach a plow to or a cart to. And he says, just as we will be goaded to the Babylonians, just as we'll be chained by the Babylonians, it'll be a good thing. So he walks into the meeting wearing this thing. And you can imagine, as he's trying to get through the door, 70 years, we're going to be caught in this war for 70 years, and it's going to be a good thing. It's going to be the best thing that ever happened to us. It'll be the best thing that we get captured, because then we're going to find out what it really matters in life. None of this other stuff we've been doing. 70 years! No, it's not going to take just a couple days. This battle, it's going to last forever, so get comfortable. What would you say to somebody what would happen to somebody like that walks into the presidential meeting with all the head honchos of Congress and Senate and National Security? What would happen to somebody like that? They would just let him go. Let him keep talking. Seems ridiculous, doesn't it? Even the message seems ridiculous, right? To think that our most awful moments might become the best things that ever happened to us. Seems pretty crazy. He even stood up and said to these leaders, who were considered shepherds, right? Today is Christ the King, the great shepherd that takes care of us. But he refers to the leaders of Israel as shepherds, and he says, "Howl, you shepherds, and wail! Roll in the dust, you leaders of the flock, for the time for your slaughter has come." What would happen if you announced that, whether you like the president or not, whoever the president is at the moment? What would happen if somebody said that? You would be applauded? Probably not. They'd cart the guy off and stick him in a padded room and call it a day, right? But that's the kind of imagination that Jeremiah has. We got to wake up, and we got to trust that these awful moments of our lives can be the best things. We should just put our wrists forward and have them just chain us and march us off. It'd be a lot easier than fighting these people, because they're great. They're so much more powerful than us. And we're just this tiny little country, and Babylon is huge, and they're known eventually as one of the greatest cultures of the past, and we should just submit. Well, it turns out that he ended up being right, because when Babylon did invade, they got carted off. Jeremiah was told to stay behind, probably because he was so loony. He was told to stay behind in the rubble of Jerusalem. But the people that got carted off and were in exile for multiple generations, so 597 to 538, so 60-ish years, the greatest things happened. This book, the beginning of this book, was written. All of it was just before this time. It was just stories told around campfires and preserved from generation to generation. But the priest sat down and said, we should collect this. Now that we have time, we should collect the stories. And thus began the tradition that we grew from. Judaism began essentially during that terrible time, and Christianity came through that a couple hundred years later. So very fascinating, because Jeremiah would, while the people were in exile, send letters and say, build vineyards. Vineyards take generations to grow before you get any produce. Just like olive trees. Plant an olive tree, at your grandchildren that might have some olives. All right. Plant vineyards. Marry one another. Live your lives. Even though that you're having this terrible time, trust that it's all going to be good. It's all going to be for the good. And that's the kind of imagination that this book invites us to. This is what's said in here is crazy. At first glance, it's absolutely crazy. When we start to kind of hear it and then start to bring our own story to it, we have a lot of story to tell these days, at least in our country. We have tough days. We're living tough days. No matter who we voted for or who we liked or didn't like, we have tough days ahead of us, don't we? And perhaps this book might invite us to wonder about that, because people that wrote it were living terrible times, maybe times much more difficult than our own. And they found a way through. So you got people like Jeremiah, you got Jesus, who are inviting people just to kind of wonder about what really matters. Even in our most desperate moments, our saddest moments, that maybe there's something deeper going on in this life that we can begin to trust. And ultimately, that's why we come together every Sunday for Mass, is to remind ourselves of that something else is happening here. We can read the newspaper and probably get pretty depressed. When we start to read the stories of people that have lived 2,000 or 3,000 years before us, and they got through it, and they found hope, even in the most desperate times, then maybe we will too. If we start to wonder a little bit more, if we start to allow the stories just to kind of jolt us, if we let the stories allow us to giggle, even in our saddest moments sometimes, there's something there that might be good, something there that might invite us to that more authentic place in our own selves. So I've probably said enough. But do you have something you'd like to say about this book, or about our tradition, or about these crazy people that we continue to tell their stories today? Or questions you might have for the group? Or insights, or funny jokes?
Do you have a resource that you recommend that helps make it more understandable?
Yeah, there are lots of good ones out there, I think. Well, first, this version of the Bible, New American Bible, is the Catholic Bible. And it actually has very small little commentary in the notes at the bottom of the page, which for most Bibles, I find most of the notes pretty helpful, to be honest. And a lot of Bibles aren't so helpful. They just kind of, they don't give you much. But sometimes they do a very good job of making connections about the ancient world to help us understand what's there. I'm actually working on my own translation of that first writer, Jay. I got very inspired by what she was writing and learned Hebrew. And I tell you, the stories are much better in their original languages, just like anything, right? Very, very clever. Very like crazy stuff that you would be embarrassed to say at the Thanksgiving dinner table. Let's put it that way. And that's the original imagination of this Bible, is kind of like, is like that, because we know that when we're laughing, what happens to us? What happens when you laugh? You're just about to laugh. Maybe you're just laughing at me. That's okay too. What happens when we laugh? Like those stand-up comics. Do you learn more when somebody is like, when you have a teacher that invites you to laugh, or do you learn more when the teacher is... Where do you learn the most?
It makes it a lot more enjoyable to learn when you have a more relaxed teacher.
Yeah. We're probably more at ease and more relaxed in our own skin, right? We have somebody that invites us to laugh. So how to find the humor? Well, learn some Hebrew, learn some Greek. That'd be the first step. That'd only take a couple 5 years. It's fine. Or you can find, there are lots of great books out there that invite us into that. Richard Rohr does a lot of work with Scripture, and he's actually has a local connection. So, you know, Richard Rohr, he was part of the New Jerusalem movement in Cincinnati. It was about 20 years ago.
Each family will get a copy of At Home with the Word, which takes the Sunday readings, all 3 of them, and gives some commentary on them. So if you read them in advance and you kind of have that time to reflect on it, when you do come to Mass on Sunday, so much more will open up to you. And I'll make sure each family here gets one of those books.
Yeah. We have a great gift in Cincinnati right now, that the greatest living Scripture scholar in the world just retired here a couple of years ago, Walter Brueggemann. Lives in Anderson Township. One of my students came up to me and said, you know, Walter Brueggemann goes to my church. And I was like, oh, that's nice. I'm sure his name is Walter Brueggemann, but it's not the Walter Brueggemann. He goes, no, it is. I'm like, what? And he's living here, and he gives talks around town. And every time I go, I just walk out going, oh my goodness, this book is incredible. And I already know it's incredible, but he just takes it to another level. So having the opportunity to hang out with people that have spent some time with these books, makes a big difference, right? Because the books are very this book is very challenging in a wonderful way, a very wonderful way. I mean, when I was teaching Scripture, I went through this thing 17 times, the book 17 times. It got better each time. Most books I find interesting maybe once or twice, just like a movie, once or twice, or maybe the special movie you watch like 15 times. But this book I find keeps getting better to me. More and more I just learn. Any other good questions, comments, funny jokes, amazing insights?
So how did you develop your teaching style with high school kids over those years?
Well, I learned a lot from the people in the book. I learned that I learned better when I was relaxed in people's classes, and found myself that if the tradition allows you to say anything, then people in your class should be allowed to say anything. Right? And that was an opportunity for us to find truth together, to find a deeper, more authentic part of our own selves and our own lives. Just trusted that if it was good for that original storyteller we call Jay, we don't know her name, or Jeremiah, or Jesus, or any of them, they're all funny. But it's good enough for her, should be good enough for me. Yeah. There's some great professors here on campus too. Art Dewey, I think I've been in his class 15 times now. Which is kind of crazy. Got a chance to live with him for 2 weeks too, which is pretty sweet. Ruth Graff was one of my teachers here, and she was hilarious. Sister of Mercy, and she'd go running around the room doing the dances of the ancients to kind of wake us up, and it was hilarious. And it was real, and it was not like just some sideshow to try to wake us up. It was like that was the material, that was what we were reading. So when we allow these stories to be as they are, and then even kind of wonder about how they might be today, like I did with that Good Samaritan story. There's nothing better out there, in my opinion. Harold Bloom wrote a book on Jay, that first writer. It was very popular in the late 80s and early 90s. So he's a Shakespearean and classics person from Yale, and written, ridiculous number of books. It says that initial writer from the Bible, Jay, wrote most of Genesis and Exodus, is the best writer in the history of the world. Think about that. The Shakespeare guy says this. When I listen to voices like that, I start to scratch my head. Maybe they're right. And I listen a little bit more and kind of go, yeah, this is pretty special stuff. There's a reason why we're still talking about Jesus. There's a reason why we're still talking about Jeremiah, these initial storytellers. Because they might have known something of the human spirit, something of the human experience that is common to us all, no matter which century we lived in or millennia we lived in. We might know something about our guts, our own fears and our own desires and our own love and our own hate. And I don't know about you, but all that rolls up inside of me, roils up inside of me quite a bit. find a way through to begin to listen to what people that lived long ago did. Just like there's a wisdom in listening to our grandparents, or people of our grandparents' generation. Anytime they tell a story, I always want to lean in and say, tell me more, and usually that shuts it down. Then they, oh, but there was this one, perfect, and then just lean in and listen. And it might not have any meaning immediately, but then as I kind of rattles around my brain, it's like, wow, they were experiencing this too. What I'm feeling now, they've been through that. As I think about our own situation now in our own country, it seems horrific, right, in many ways, or the future could be horrific in terms of our divisions with each other. And yet you think about our grandparents who lived during 1 or 2 world wars, the Great Depression, other wars, other protests, other all kinds of crazy things. They still smile. So I think they might know something. I want to know what they know. Because if they can get through all that, then we can get through this, whatever this might be to us. Should we pray? Do you think?
Yeah.